No matter where you go camping, the ever-present dangers of wildlife elements are always there. You should be very careful while out there with your friends, family, or even if you're going solo. These subscribers sent in their creepiest, allegedly true stories while camping out in the outdoors. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to hit that subscribe button as it helps me out a lot. If you have a story that you'd like to send, be sure to send it into the swampdweller.net website or the email that you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone in the swamp. Now, let's get into these creepy as hell stories. In March 2014, a couple of friends and I got stupidly high and went on a road trip together. It wouldn't be till many years later that we realized how scary our trip really was. My friends, who I'll refer to as Steve and Karen from this point, had recently started a band and were road tripping together to each of our gigs. To give you an idea of our personalities, I was a pretty big, easygoing, chill dude. Was friends with anyone who didn't give off bad vibes. Steve was the dude who always thought he was tough and also your typical funny guy. Karen was short, had dirty blonde hair, and was super shy and quiet. Karen and Steve were in the early phase of a relationship at the time we started the band. Enough background though. Let me start off by telling you where we were all about to be on spring break at our college. So we decided it would be super awesome to drive from Massachusetts all the way down to Florida. We planned to do some camping there, and then if we had extra time after, we'd head to New Orleans, as well, to party it up. We weren't much in the way of outdoorsmen or anything like that, but you know how it was when you're 19. You just want adventure, feel invincible. Karen had gotten us our first gig in her home state of Connecticut that Sunday evening. And then from there, we headed straight out on a long road trip. The trip was a super exhausting one. And when we finally arrived in Florida, we were all pretty beat. Reached the campgrounds at like 1 in the morning on a Monday. And as we were too tired to get a real camp going, we set up a tent around a wooded area 10 feet off the road. After crashing, we got up only to have a good laugh at the fact that we actually camped in a ditch. After the chuckle, we smoked some hash and proceeded to go towards a gas station. Determined to get info on a good and real camping spot before continuing to camp legit this time. When we got to the gas station, Karen went in to ask the locals where they'd recommend camping. She found a couple of country boys who said they'd lead us to a great spot. Normally, this would have been where most people's alarm bells went off. But like I said, we were super high at this point, and our only thoughts were how epic the spots would be, as no doubt locals knew where to chill. We followed the two men till we ended up in a spot in the woods near a shallow, slow-flowing river. The moment we got out of our vehicles, the men in their strong southern accents informed us, "We've got a lot of firewood we've been cutting. We'd be more than happy to share with y'all. You can also go swimming out here, but mind your body parts as there are gators out here." These dudes were trying to sell us hard on the camping spot, and I was okay with it. I found one of the guys attractive as I have a thing for the bad guys. And if you ask my friends, they'll tell you I can detect one from miles away. At any rate, being high as I went up to Steve and Karen and giggled while suggesting that we should tell these two dudes we were going to get more firewood and then just never return, we were too high at the time to remember they just offered us a firewood, and we used that excuse when they said we could use their wood. After we began driving away, Karen informed us she had felt uncomfortable with the way the guys were speaking to her, and she was glad we ditched them. Jokingly, I told her wouldn't it be funny if we looked back and they were following us? Karen smacked me and told me I shouldn't even joke like that, but being totally out of it, I looked back anyway. To our surprise, there was the old beat-up pickup truck following us. Super freaked out by all of this, we tried making a lot of sharp turns when the opportunity arrived, but they kept up, staying at a distance as they did. After several hours of trying to ditch them, it was getting dark, and we assumed we'd finally lost them as they were no longer in sight. We found a campsite we were supposed to pay for, but we couldn't find anywhere to pay, so we just crashed in a spot and set up camp anyway. Having never went to get firewood, Karen and I decided to do so, couldn't help but crack jokes about the rednecks that were gonna jump us. Again, we were super high, so any fear we initially felt while trying to lose them was gone pretty quickly. Gathering some branches and leaves, we soon went back to only find Steve had already found some stuff and started a fire. We spent the rest of the night cooking sausages, eating, and then downing an entire bottle of wine together. In the morning, super hungover, we decided we should probably get some groceries. After getting groceries, I got sick from eating an entire pack of birthday cake Oreos the night before, and we continued on. It was just before sunset when we found a campsite about 100 feet from the road on the outskirts of the Ocala National Forest. There were headlights through the trees, and the place seemed safe enough. So soon I used my super slow internet on my phone. We were shocked we even got service out here to look up any scary stories about this forest. After some digging, I found some on the Rainbow People, which were a cult that supposedly lived in the forest and tried to force others to live there as well. Sadly, the 10 minutes of waiting for the whole story to download weren't worth it, as we felt we didn't want to be scared, did we? We were joking about it when we heard a sudden creak in the woods, just outside the campfire. We figured the rednecks wouldn't have followed us this far, right? And having just watched the Blair Witch a few weeks prior, I made a joke asking, what if it was the Ocala Witch? We all snickered at this, though. We were somewhat freaked. Steve went into the car, turned on the headlights, and we drove around and did donuts for a bit to make sure everything was clear. Assured that no one was out there, we decided to crash after throwing water on the fire, pitching a tent. It was about 10 minutes into trying to sleep when we noticed a weird light outside our tent. The fire had started back up. We were freaked out by this, as we completely drenched the fire with water before going to bed. What's more, the fire was growing pretty big. I made a joke check on the Ocala Witch half-heartedly, but Steve and Karen nodded no. We eventually crashed, and upon waking in the morning, the fire was just ash. We started packing, and Steve thought it'd be funny to tie sticks together and hang them around the woods to freak us out. The same night, we decided to go deeper into the Ocala forest. We drove around looking for a good place to camp while we smoked, and I read stories about Skunk Ape. It was super late, and we were all tired, and we began to think that we went too deep for camping. We dismissed this idea as there was plenty of room for our car to drive, so there must be a place to camp out here. As we continued driving, we noticed a bunch of old, broken-down cars with graffiti on them. Progressing further, we noticed a bunch of people. One of them, an old, bearded dude who looked like he could have been a skunk ape himself. From a distance, rolling down the window only enough to speak, I asked the man what was going on. In a deep voice, he responded, "A gathering." I asked him of what, to which he replied, "Of people." It turns out we ran into the Rainbow People. They weren't a cult so much as they were hundreds of hippies who were living in the woods. They were actually pretty hospitable and showed us around. They'd always greet and say goodbye with the words, "Love you." The dude showing us around introduced us to his wife, who was pregnant with their 7th child. The hippies were really nice and told us about living in the woods. They talked about if you were lost, you'd simply yell, you needed an adult. If you wanted tobacco of some kind, you'd yell Nick at night. There was a group that would come give you some. They called lighters fire dragons. The outside world, Babylonia. And they didn't trade in money, which they referred to as Babylonia tickets, but rather shiny rocks and pretty stuff. We all got really high that night and were having a good time. They got us food and even took us to a drum circle. It turns out they were all over the forest, usually only 15 minutes from campsites around the forest itself. We knew this was weird, but we went along with it anyway. At one point, Karen was in one of the hippies' laps drinking a mysterious liquid, but she seemed fine, so we didn't sweat it. There was even...
As an historian, I'm often asked if I could stop one event in modern history from happening, what would it be? My answer is World War I.
One hippie who didn't speak, but only beatboxed. Eventually, we got tired and our guide showed us to one of their camps they aptly named Shut the Hell Up, which was for parents and kids to have a quiet place to sleep. I awoke the next morning and decided to read since it was raining out. The rain stopped by the time Karen and Steve awoke and we hung out with everyone around camp, listening to their stories for a bit. One of the groups was talking about a woman who'd been dosed and freaked out. It turns out dose means she was given acid without her knowledge and consent, so it was perfectly understandable why she would be tripping. We found this weird and decided we'd pack up, but as we were taking down our tent, there were murmurs from behind us. People kept saying you're doing it wrong. And looking back, we saw a few people walking towards us continuing to shout, "You're doing it wrong!" One of the men soon reached us and asked, "And we're packing up after one night?" Karen then explained that as we were trying to get towards New Orleans soon, we had to go. The man then suggested we stay longer, as they had people that had been living out here for months. The man followed up with, "You don't want to go out to Babylonia. That place will rot the shit out of your brains." Upon realizing we weren't receptive of their message, the hippies grew angrier and more aggressive, saying things like, "Check out these Babylonians. They're doing it wrong." Weirded out, I then said, "Dude, we have to be back in school in like 3 days." The man in second said, "Quit school. Come live with us in the woods." This was soon followed by someone in the back shouting to get the duct tape. Karen got really angry at this, and we spent the next hour packing while she debated with the other members, explaining we were on the same side, just doing it different ways. I think she outsmarted them, which probably wouldn't be too hard considering all the drugs these people did. As the guide soon moved on and led us out of the woods. He apologized for the others while some in the back screamed about how we were lucky they didn't duct tape us to a tree. Upon arriving at the entrance of the forest, we saw the guide's wife again, who looked at us, hugged us, and smiled as we were leaving, telling us she was glad we were getting out. It almost seemed as though she wished she could. The rest of the trip we went to Tallahassee, wound up at a dinner themed after Obama, drove to a park on the coast where manatees were supposed to swim before driving through a weird suburban island, and then to New Orleans. We didn't find anywhere to camp since New Orleans is a city. Well, really didn't think that one out, huh? But eventually, we found a grassy area between a stadium and its parking area. It was cold out, and I wanted to sleep in the van, but Steve insisted on making a tent, as she was in a relationship with him. Karen went to the tent to sleep with him. We were awoken to the sound of my car alarm going off as someone was banging on the car window. It was cops. They asked us where the keys to shut the alarm off were, and I told them it was 10 feet away, near the tent. Karen and Steven had been awoken and came out with knives only to realize it was the cops, so they kept the knives hidden. The cops asked what we were doing, and we explained to them that we were college kids road tripping for spring break and camping all over. Cops told me I could stay in the van for the night, and Karen and Steven could stay in the tent if we stayed put. I'm a young black man, and I'd heard nothing but stories about police brutality on Tumblr. So it being New Orleans, I freaked out, thinking irrationally, I realize now, that they were just separating us so they could kill us later. As it turned out, that's not what they were doing at all. They checked our IDs and they just wanted to make sure we were safe. The remainder of the trip was completely uneventful, which we were grateful for. It wasn't until years later, while high, we reminisced about the events of the trip. It was then we realized how lucky we actually were. We were in a seriously dangerous situation with that cold in the woods, also with those country boys. We were so lucky to have made it out of those situations. The only reason we hadn't felt as in danger at the time was because we were high most of the trip. It's funny now, but it's a good warning to be safe when traveling.
Zone B lost. Zone A captured. Defeat comes for us all.
My story takes place over 3 summers on the Front Range in northern Colorado.
This war is for territory.
I grew up camping in our family spot, a place called the Neverwinter Wilderness. which was full of ghost towns and creepy abandoned mines. The place had been passed down for many generations, and I thought it was beautiful, despite some of the creepier elements. When I turned 15, I got my permit and felt grateful to be able to go to my family's lands and explore unsupervised. My first outing was a disaster by most camper standards, as I forgot most of everything, and basically had some beans and hot dogs. However, I was ecstatic to be out here. It was only a few minutes after going out on my own that I started to feel off. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I quickly dismissed the notion, as I knew I was the only human out here, so if anything was watching me, it was likely a big cat or an animal of some kind. I wasn't too worried. Just to be safe, I pulled out my father's AK and loaded it. Nothing would get me like this, I thought. Near sundown, I figured I'd go out on a ridge and chill to watch the sunset. Bringing my AK and some stew, I headed up and soon saw the magnificent wonder and glory that was the sun setting on our land. After such a scenic view, I'd forgotten all about the idea that I might be being watched.
Whenever you introduce somebody like this guy, you look for the superlatives and salient points, and you don't have to look too.
Perfectly frank, I hate talking to Greg. My particular line of work was pleasant enough, and much face-to-face contact.
Control.
Fortunately, of course, I'm contacting inevitable. So, Greg's side, he's perfect behind him. Why are we having this meeting? And drop my second brain into the conversation. Called me to have a meeting, Greg. Linked, side disappointment. You have a previously undocumented cryptid last week, which was sent to Shailene Mountain.
Enemy claimed Zone A.
Why was there an
You
undocumented
captured
subject
Zone
to
C.
your area? I tried not to be condescending.
Gained
I realize that
Zone
finding these subjects can be frightening themselves,
Enemy
but that's no
claimed
excuse
Zone
for
B.
their official work. And if you can't do a job, I'll find someone who can.
Lost the lead.
My blood began to boil, but I learned long ago not to be emotion in my brain. I forced a smile. I can assure you that I wasn't afraid. If you read the reviews from the extraction team and the medical report of this employer who I found, everyone gave me glowing reports. Greg slowly took off his glasses before leaving the point of his chair. Yes, sir.
Shut the
I
enemy
feel you're
down.
often a challenge to my authority. I learned to keep my mouth shut in moments, but I'm sure my face was crimson. Greg sighed. The subject you picked up last week, 468.72 kilograms, he resided in
Zone
Shailene
A
Mountain,
captured.
environmental
Zone advantage is
reptilian
yours.
program.
Zone C
There's
lost.
several hundred acres of Colorado wilderness that's cleverly blockaded from any civilization. I nodded. Thank you for explaining that, Greg. Well, I was the lead consultant who designed it,
Zone
particularly
B
the NRP.
captured. You
Greg
have
scowled.
advantage.
He's got new orders from Washington, explained gruffly. He tossed a sack of paper across a desk. Lawyer moved to clean out his ENRP of all undocumented subjects. I stared at him. Clear out. Where do they go?
Zone B lost.
Greg shrugged. Last week's subject has grammatically desirable objects. I think that's a phrase I used. My jaw dropped. Like his eye colour. contemplation.
Pulling away.
When ground into a powder, it's apparently almost 3% less expensive than bleeding like coloring. I nearly leapt out of my chair. I'm gonna kill him and take his eyes out. Why? Very exciting. Federal government's official position that it doesn't exist. What? I spat. Of course it exists. Greg shook his head.
Zone A lost. Your enemy has
That there's no
power
concrete evidence one way or another.
Damn.
So there cannot be a policy that regulates on the subject of pain, public, chain accounting. Therefore, Doiber has been instructed to terminate the subject of ring.
Zone
I
C
closed my eyes
captured.
several hairs apart. If your emotional condition prevents you from able to complete a task like so, there are stronger people who are capable. I broke my breathing. I'm absolutely fine, Greg. But you see that the order to dispose of something inherently requires it exists. Several times. The official position is that they do not exist. I sighed. Yes, I just... Look, never mind. They don't exist. Why not simply
Zone
release
C
it back to the
lost.
wild?
Power
Why are
play.
they going to kill him?
Enemy has your zones.
Greg gazed at me, exclaiming, I'm not going to kill him, he said matter of fact. You are. I stepped back, slightly bored. Well, that wraps up this up. He shot a chip of voice. I stood up to the way, Joel shrugged. You know, they screwed up the name like fun. But it to himself. I turned back to see him prove his brave. They call it the Department of the Interior, but it only covers the outside stuff. I had been airlifted to trailing parts of the base. By the time I'd landed here, my resolve had returned.
Of course, I'm down
Though
the
Greg comes to us in the helicopter, I knew that our rank to once more had ground. I'm not killing that cryptid, he explained to the man in me. I could tell that he was in charge, to everyone around him, right? Look down at me. Okay. Responded to me. I sputtered, yeah, well, so that's it. Sure. Wait. The only reason people were requesting it was because they wanted the subject to be dead. He turned away from me to stare at the Colorado sky. I felt betrayed at this moment. A 7mm Winchester is concealment into fire which caused death by hemorrhage in 24 hours. It's far less risky than the tranquilizer they suggested or terminate. Frankly, there's no telling how vicious this wild beast can get while their men trying to put themselves at risk. 24 hours to die? That'll be torture. You don't have to do that, he's not dangerous.
Wow.
Glance back. Don't worry, we won't be a threat if everyone remains on G. Frankly, I'm glad to hear that you staying out of harm's way. I don't think you realise what you're getting into with this monster. Better stay with Greg, where it's safe. My world span. Grabbed my head in my hands and walked away from the room. I focused on the crisp on my neck. I took in the 50-mile view of the wilderness. I thought about why I took this job in the first place. Can I return to the charge? I'll do. I responded. Give me the tranquilizer, I'm in the right. I blinked away a rogue tear that I was determined not to let them see. But I'll need a bag of red gummy bears to be bright. I bounced back and forth for a 5 rating so I'm really counting.
At Edison, we know that creating a clean energy future takes teamwork. So while we're modernizing the electric grid, the Garzas modernize their roof to be the first on their block to go solar. We're helping reduce emissions from cars and trucks for cleaner air, so kids on every corner can focus on just being kids. Together, we have all the power we need to build a brighter future for
You captured Zone C. You have zone advantage. Zone B lost.
Shit.
3 minutes left. Zone B captured. You have zone advantage. Strength, Titan.
Oh yeah.
Zone C lost. You captured Zone A. Zone advantage is yours. One minute.
Shit.
Zone
They
B
won.
lost. Defeat comes for us all. The zones are your life, Guardian. Keep fighting. You'll get it.
Army. He rifle slid from side to side in my lap. Did George love Lenny? Mrs. Nix asked as she walked the rows of my 7th grade class. He shot Lenny in the head. Most people declare themselves unable to do that to a person they loved. She stopped pacing, and for reasons I'll never understand, she looked directly at me. But I'll have to ask most people a very specific question. If choosing not to kill someone is the result of your own discomfort, doesn't that mean you love yourself more than you love anyone else? He is leaning towards me and seemed to tune everyone else out. If your definition of love isn't completely sacrificing your own comfort, then how would you define it? My hands were too numb to tremble as I filled the bolt-action rifle with its deadly contents. I loaded the chamber with a decisive snap, and returned it to my lap. I had joined Doibu because I love the unknown parts of the world. Fear is power, but only to a certain few. And extracting fear is nothing different from extracting human potential. But sometimes the task of people requires us to build impossible hope from nothing more than broken pieces. I am being forced to kill something that I love because I love it. That much of my humanity remains intact. I turned away from the rest of the people in the jeep, so I didn't have to hide my tears. The vehicle plunged onwards, unabated, into the hidden forest with the futile goal of finding something more monstrous than what was already in.
When I was 15, my father and I loved to go camping. This is something we did whenever we had the opportunity. There was some really good forest around where we lived, full of life and sounds. Probably the most peaceful part for my dad at least was the sounds of the nature. It annoyed me, but my father loved it. It made a difference from the mechanical sounds of the job where he worked. So on one particular evening, we do some fishing, We're having a great time looking up at all the stars. The sun's just beginning to set. You can just about see the northern star in the hemisphere. We decide to call it a night. Now while we're walking back to our camping site, my dad continually stops. Not saying why.
No zones means
Now
no
normally I
victory.
just make fun of him, but I can see that he has his hand on his gun. I know something is wrong. I don't want to scare my dad and act as though I don't notice anything.
You captured Zone C.
Every time that we begin walking,
Zone B.
we can hear a sound
You have zone advantage.
louder than our own footsteps. It can't be identified as one specific thing. It's hard to describe, but almost like a deep thud, just beyond your range of hearing, but you can still notice it, if that makes sense. So anyway, we continue towards our camp when my dad suddenly shouts out, "Hey, you stop immediately, I have a gun." I ask my dad what's going on.
As one.
He tells me to be quiet. He says you take one more step, this is your last warning. And with that, gunfire. There's a few moments of silence before my dad grabs my hand and tells me to run. I don't know what's going on and begin crying in fear.
Zone B lost.
What's more strange is we run past our campsite. We run all the way back to where our car is and speed out of there. He tells me to never tell my mum what happened and that he'll explain one day. As you can imagine, this is the most terrifying experience in my life. Eventually my dad did tell me. He said he thought we were being followed by a very large man, but he eventually caught a glimpse of something in the moonlight. Now it looks like a person, yes, but upon closer inspection,
Zone B.
you can tell that it's definitely not a normal person. He describes it to me as a skinwalker. Now I don't know too much about them, just that they're to be avoided. He said that's when he pulled the trigger. He knows he landed a direct hit on it, or at least within an inch of this creature, and it didn't even move an inch. This is when he made us begin running. So this happened 17 years ago, so please forgive me if exact details are fuzzy. So it's the summer of 1999. I was spending a vacation with my mother in New Mexico. I was a 12-year-old at the time and had a severe attitude. I made friends easily with a few girls that lived just around the corner from my mum's home. We spent every moment together that summer. We're a group of 4,
Falling behind.
all of us thinking we were older, smarter than everyone. Nikki, Katie, Julie, and myself, the last generation of homegrown minds,
Have advantage.
laying outside on the trampoline until dark in sleepovers. Would watch VHS tapes, listen to cassette tapes on our Walkman. It was okay to let your children walk around town at night. Very rarely locked our front door. We had no cell phones or internet. My backyard had a concrete wall around it and a gate. Now behind the wall was desert as far as the eye could see. Just a barren wasteland of dirt, cacti, shrubs and mountains way off in the distance. This town had a major railroad track running straight through it. There was a major street that had a gas station, restaurant, hotels and attractions. We all received the same warnings from our parents. Stay out in the desert, stay away from the tracks, and don't walk the main strip at night. Do you think we listened though? Absolutely not. Julie, Nikki, and I spent our days walking through the desert, crossing the tracks down the strip to Katie's home.
Sometimes we would just walk around till dusk. Some days, we would go to my home to jump on the trampoline.
Since 1994, Anthem has been helping Medi-Cal members get quality, no-cost healthcare.
This particular day, we get to Katie's house prepared to stay the weekend because her parents are out of town. We were gonna have a party.
Shit, they're fine there.
The first few nights, the girls were jumping from a spiral staircase to a giant beanbag. I refused to participate in this due to my extreme fear of heights. When we got down to the sleepover business, so to say, and decided to watch the original Exorcist, you know, the one with Linda Blair, I didn't sleep. The second night, we all told our parents that Katie's mom was going to drive us to the movies.
9 more.
We all got money from the movies, then promptly walked down to the strip to get junk food. Now, I wish I could say that we're aware of the surroundings, but we're not. We were absolutely oblivious of the man who followed us all the way back to the home. I feel that I should mention that Katie's parents are loaded. They have a huge property with numerous buildings, broken down cars that her dad was remodeling. Their house had a large open kitchen, dining and living room. There were no walls and the whole room was lined with windows. There were 2 doors front and back. The day was just as planned. We get our junk food and make it home safely. We made pizza in the oven. For some reason, one of the girls turns on the news. As we're eating, we hear a story about staying inside because there's a report of a suspicious man walking on the strip. That's it. Suspicious man. We laugh and joke about it. Fast forward a couple of hours. I don't remember what happened, but as girls do, someone said something that hurt Julie's feelings and she storms out of the home.
3 minutes left.
I went after her, opened the front door just in time to see her lighting a cigarette. I sat there with her on a bench while she gone on about the other 2.
Power play. You took them. Now
Son.
hold them. Zone B
The air grows thick with anxiety. Julie felt it too. I quietly ask her if she feels as though she's being watched. She responds with a little nod, and then we're blinded. Someone's in a car in the driveway. My heart's racing as I stood up, pulling Julie out of the spot she seems to be stuck in. As we turned to run inside, the man made a sound. I can't describe the sound other than a high-pitched squeal that turned into a growl. I was scared beyond all reason, but somehow I'm able to get myself and Julie inside. The moment we're inside, the headlights go off. It's pitch black again. I lock the door and turn off the lights. By now, Julie has regained her composure to tell the other 2 what's happened. As I frantically check the back door and turn every light on, I tell them to be quiet and listen by the back door. I heard the car door close. I was praying to every god that he would go away. Then, right by my cheek, the door handle started to turn slowly. Now frantically, I crawl away from the door. I now move over to where my friends are. For the next 2 or 3 hours, we sat still, listening to this man bang on every window or door trying to get inside. The phone was located across the room right next to the 2 windows. I finally got up, gathering the courage to run to the phone.
Controlling those zones is
I
the
call my
only
mom.
path to victory.
I tell her that we're all alone. Someone's trying to breach the house. I hung up with her and waited. Julie screamed to the man that we called the cops, and all of a sudden, the banging stops. He sat there listening to him getting in his car. Then, the sound starts again. That turned into a growl. He's gone now. My mum and stepdad didn't show up, checking out the place. They found tire tracks and cigarette butts in the driveway. Whoever this was had been watching us for a while. The truly scary part is all the scratch marks on the windows and doors. Clearly not possible for a human to make. This is why I know it was a skinwalker. Needless to say, Katie spent the rest of the weekend at Nikki's house. Had a great story for her parents, which of course they
Anyway.
Here you go. Toss the ball in there.
Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you guys had a great holiday season, and hope you guys are ready to tackle 2019 with me. We've covered some truly terrifying stories over 2018, and I thought what better way to do tribute to that than to compile them here in this video for you guys. So, be sure to sit back, relax, and enjoy these spooks. If you have a story that you'd like to share in a future video on the channel, be sure to send it in to swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Let's get spooked. When I bought this property a couple of years ago, one of the main selling points was the woods. Between the house and the road are rows and rows of red pine, roughly 5 acres and standing maybe 35 to 40 feet tall. Walking through these woods gives off an eerie feeling, but enjoyable still. The ground covered by many thick needles giving off a spring step when trekking through. Behind the home are more of a wild side landscape with many different trees, a creek, and a winding path that's just wide enough for a small utility vehicle. These woods, the kids and I enjoyed most. We have done a few projects such as build a small wooden bridge to get to the other side of the creek. We made a rope swing, and they all have their own battery-operated vehicles to drive the path if they wanted to. One thing we did do last year looking back is we found a huge pile of rocks in the middle of nowhere. The rocks varied in size from a handful to a little over a bowling ball size. Well, we were pulling rocks off that pile as if there was something buried inside. We never found anything other than more rocks. The pile of rocks was maybe 10 feet long, 8 feet wide, and maybe 3 feet tall. We dug down deep enough to see the rocks that were buried in the ground, so we stopped. I am thinking now that maybe it wasn't such a good idea. In recent past, our family had dealt with something I thought would never happen, and that was a ghost or ghosts in our home. The first story written explains the details in that, but this happened in my home. I and my wife talked about this with friends and family, but nobody else after that. I live in a small city. Talking with them, stories of this property began slowly coming out of the woodwork. The following stories below are accounts from what we heard happening in the woods. My wife spoke to her sister and her sister's husband. Her husband recalls 3 stories of the previous owner's experience. 2 of them, he claims he can't remember. but I am taking it as either he's making it up to scare us or he just refuses to tell. The one experience he did say was the man that lived there chose to never take trees from the woods. The main source of heating for the house is a wood stove. He never hunted these woods either. I spoke to a friend of mine, who we will call Birds, about the haunted house incident. Birds has been hunting in the wood behind this property for many years and decided to tell me of his experiences, of what has happened to him and many hunters, including his young nephew now. Going out in the early hours before sunrise, everyone seems to see a silhouette of a man walking around, and when approached, he disappears. Other accounts are there is a light they see about the side of a credit card flying around, and that too often, when approached, disappears. The one event that kind of sent chills up his spine was one morning. He was up in a tree, all set up and waiting as hunters do. He saw a light down below the bottom of the tree just sitting there. So he called out and asked who it was. Got no answer. He became angry that this person was messing with his hunting site, so he began to threaten him or her. The light stayed right at the bottom, so Bert climbed down, and as he climbed down, he saw the light move away. He said he chased this light a good 40 yards or so, then just disappeared. He says he remembers standing there in a thick fog, and all of a sudden, debris from up above the tree, such as leaves, twigs, and other things, came falling down upon him. As he looked up, this huge gust of wind, strong enough to almost knock him down, came rushing in. He says he doesn't hunt alone anymore. Another friend, who is a volunteer for the fire department, told me they were called out there about a fire about 6 years ago. Apparently, half of those houses caught on fire, but luckily no one was hurt, or in the home at the time of the fire. He said it was strange, because they could not find the source of the fire. He said that while they were there, he saw someone standing just inside the yard by the woods for a glimpse, and when he turned to catch up with them, there was no one there. He said he had an eerie feeling about the woods. He told his supervisor about it, but they never believed him. They thought maybe it was just some kind of smoke inhalation or something causing him to see that.
Your enemy can't kill if they're dead.
Okay, these are the stories I've heard during my time. I have not had any experiences myself in these woods, nor my kids, but recently an event has happened with someone I know from work. I have had some raccoon problems in the last few weeks as well. We have, or should I say, have 6 chickens. In 2 evenings, we had lost 2 to the raccoons. We know they are raccoons because we saw them from the 2nd floor looking out the window in the evening. A coworker of mine, who we will call Billy, overheard me telling another about losing my chickens, and he had offered his services to come out and exterminate them. Awesome. We agreed for him to come out on a Saturday evening, and he and his friends would come out and camp out for a couple of hours around the chicken coop late at night to pick off them as they came. Around 8:30 in the morning, they pulled into the driveway, got their gear, and decided to change of plan. Because the layout of the property was, they first were going to check the abandoned camper, then patrol the pines, and then patrol the woods in the back. Within 10 minutes, I received a text from them saying they got a huge one in the camper, and were now going to patrol the pines. I replied with great job guys, but be careful in the pines. There are a couple of deep bunkers with the pines, and you don't want to trip on them, because you can get really hurt. About 15 minutes later, I walked out on the deck from the 2nd floor and saw them coming back. I asked how it went, and they told me they thought they better come back to the house. What had happened was, they walked deep within looking up the pines to pick them out of the trees, and they heard branches and needles crunching from what they thought was a coyote. They looked down in the snow, and they had seen some tracks. The noises grew, and it seemed like there were more than one now. They felt that they were being circled. Worried that they stumbled upon a den, they hightailed it back to the house. They said they were going to walk into the backwoods now. I thought maybe this wasn't a good idea, so I tried to talk them out of it. I told them I had heard stories of those woods in the dark. Their reply was that they have dealt with scary things in the woods before, and that they would be fine. Okay then, good luck on your journey, and I shall see you on the other side, I told them, and I went back inside.
3.
About 10 minutes later, I received a text. We are leaving. I walked outside to catch up with them before they left for the night. Before they walked down the woods, I saw 2 young men with their firearms, confident and all rambled up for the extermination. When I saw them on the return, they were 3 shades whiter, eyes wide open, and they were talking so fast I had to ask them to slow down. One of them just put his guns away and got right into the truck. Billy explained to me what had happened. They walked down the path, and while walking, they felt they were being watched. They heard a big crack of a branch on the ground behind them. They quickly turned around and flashed their spotlight and saw nothing. No noise of an animal running away. No broken branches. Just nothing. They continued down the path, and about midway, Billy saw what had looked like a glowing white blob, he says, roughly about 5 feet tall and hovering. They flashed a light on it, and it looked like it moved so fast it was a blur and disappeared. Talking to each other, asking if they saw it, and just then the branches and twigs crunching behind them. The others saw it again, and as they flashed a light, again it disappeared. This happened 2 more times, each time appearing to get closer and closer. It was messing with them, appearing behind them. This was when I received the text, and they ran back to the house. Billy told this story to many co-workers at my place of employment, and of course he got a hard time for it. No one believes his story nor mine at the house, and that's okay. There are now 3 guys at work who are planning on walking the woods to debunk his story. I am unsure if this is a good idea or not, but I am leaning towards letting it. Yesterday, I had told a friend online about what's going on in the woods. She told me it may sound crazy, but she may have an idea of what it is. She is into Fae lore. She told me it sounds like a dark fairy. She doesn't remember the name, but she's thinking it's a Morrow fairy. She says that this fairy, which can be 5 foot tall, I guess, walks the woods and eats bones. Bones from animals, of course, that have been killed. She says they protect their woods from their stash. They normally don't harm humans, but are known to play and chase. A way to test it would to be bringing a chicken bone, throw it away into a circle, see if it's gone the next day. I am leaning more of a ghost than a fairy, but what do I know? My life in the rural Midwest has always been pretty mundane. I've always enjoyed being in and around the woods, hills, and rivers. Most of the friends I have today, many years later, are thanks to that. We all have lots of stories, but one sticks out above all others. A friend and I had set up camp in the woods along the Illinois River, many miles from the nearest town, which had maybe 1,000 people in it. We sat by the fire, tucking on a bottle of lemonade, vodka, and laughing, and attempting to catch and release small catfish while preparing to sleep, because we had planned to leave early the following morning. Eventually, we hear the inevitable sounds of branches and slow crunching footsteps. Joke about it, and remember a story passed around by the locals about a high school teacher who was approached by a panther while in the woods taking samples for her upcoming class. However, this particular part of Illinois is too north to see mountain lions or similar large cats, so we didn't worry much about it. The time comes for us to call it a night. We bucket some water on the fire and head into the shelter. Only a few moments pass before we hear it. A rumbling noise, similar to a growling. It isn't necessarily feline, but it's obviously very close, somewhat terrifying. Eventually we devised a plan. Stay together, exit the shelter with our sleeping bags spread out around our upper bodies to appear larger than we actually were, weapons in hand. We shine all of our lights around, shout and kick and throw things. Almost immediately, we watched a very large cat leap from a low branch and lower itself into the weeds. We continued to shine our lights in that direction. Didn't see any sign of it. All those sounds of something moving slowly could still be heard nearby. We decided to relight the fire and stay awake until sunup, watching and listening for any signs of it. The sound subsided after a while, and eventually the sun began to rise. We took down our makeshift shelter, gathered our backpacks, and walked towards the nearest tree line exit before continuing our journey. Both looked back at that day, wondering if we would have died if we were not well prepared. This is something I recently had happen to me a few weeks ago. I have more encounters while hunting, but I will share those another time if this goes alright. They're a bit longer, more strange. I am from southwest Georgia and live right on the Georgia-Alabama line. I was riding dirt roads one night with my friend and her younger sister. We were fishing earlier that evening and didn't have any luck, so we decided to get some beer and go for a ride. On into the night after riding dirt roads in between Lumpkin and Georgetown, we went to a spot I know pretty well. That was a
I believe our wares will be to your liking. We don't simply protection. We provide you with a missing piece of yourself. So many guardians. Still gets to me sometimes. Work has finally begun again on new wares. I can hardly believe it. The spider. How well do you know our mutual friend? Not well enough, I'm sure. Careful, Titan. I don't need your broad shoulders knocking our wares over.